Hi folks, thanks very much for joining me on this very frosty but very sunny midweek, the last week in November. Celtic are in the Vatican, Rangers through the imperious shape of John Gregg are in Buckingham Palace, so everything is as it should be with the world, both halves of the old firm getting the same number of points in the league race at the weekend. But sadness at the news of losing a couple of famous figures. One for me, Geordie Walker, the guitarist of Killing Joke. He died at the weekend at 64 years old. He was one of the coolest looking guys you've ever seen in your life, and one of the coolest sounding. That guitar noise he made, absolutely fantastic. If you're like me, just a Killing Joke tourist, that's behind me. That album is Nighttime, the Nighttime album. I think it's the most commercially successful, certainly their best known album. They came out in the 80s when I was in my teens. In fact, probably the best track on that is Love Like Blood. If you've never heard of Killing Joke, even if you haven't heard of Love Like Blood, when you hear it, you'll recognise that guitar sound. It's a phenomenal track. Really great at summing up that decade, the 80s. And there's a song on that album called 80s. And I was listening to it on a loop. YouTube this summer. Just look it up. It's Killing Joke 80s. And it's put in the Tube, because it's on the Tube, the music programme that's on Channel 4 when I was a nipper. So, absolutely fantastic. You've got Jazz Coleman, the lead singer. He's done up in the full Punisher gear, looking completely insane in a way that's really appropriate for the song itself and that decade, that horrible decade in which I did some serious growing up, but I haven't. I'll let you know when I get all the way, when I achieve full maturity. But Geordie Walker is absolutely fantastic in that performance as well, proving that he could do it just as well live as he could in the recording studio. You see, that album, Nighttime, is it just me? I've always thought Jazz looks a bit like Shakin' Stevens. I'm sorry to say that, but Geordie Walker, cool as anything. And Jazz Coleman, pretty scary dude as well, great stage presence. But yeah, he looks a bit like Shakin' Stevens. And it's murder, because when I'm going through my Shakin' Stevens collection in my vinyl, what about a Green Door and This Old House, and I pull out the Killing Joke. Oh, wrong one. But yeah, that, and the thing to remember is, I've just remembered Nirvana. They famously ripped off the guitar riff for 80s, and that ended up kind of almost became a legal battle, but was resolved in a cool way. If you watch Prime, if you've got Amazon Prime, good friend of mine, a good cyber friend of mine, Ian Crawford, massive Killing Joke fan. I know he'll be devastated to hear the news about Geordie. He recommended to me a few years ago a documentary about Killing Joke that's on Prime. I think it's still on Amazon Prime, so check that out. It's wild. They are absolutely wild, and it's good stuff. And Geordie is as cool as anything all the way through it. Fantastic guitarist. Really sad news. And we also lost Terry Venables, 80 years old. El fantastic manager. Player for Spurs and Chelsea, got a couple of England caps, but probably made his name as a manager, really innovative manager with Crystal Palace, late 70s, early 80s, eventually becomes Spurs manager, England manager at Euro 96, nearly won them the thing, was a penalty, the present England manager, Gareth Southgate, misses the penalty against Germany that stops England getting to the final, where they could probably have beaten the Czechs, I would imagine. They weren't as good as the Germans, as was proved in that final, and I was there at that final and at that semi-final, and it's something I'm going to come on to talk about in this video. But yeah, Terry, most famously probably manager of Barcelona, won them their first La Liga title in a decade, got them to the European Cup final in 85-86. Now, this is a time when Barcelona had never won the European Cup, had never been champions of Europe. They're still trying to catch up desperately. They're still way behind Real Madrid on the number of European Cup / Champions Leagues achieved, but back then they'd never been champions of Europe at all, and Real Madrid had done it 6 times at this point, so it was a real embarrassment for them, and here they were on their second European Cup final, and Steve Archibald, a Scotsman, up front, Bernd Schuster in midfield, what a player he was. Real chance to win the thing. Steaua Bucharest beat them 2-0 on penalties, 2-0, not even a single penalty scored in the shootout by a Barcelona player. Big Helmut Dukadam, the Steaua goalkeeper, having an absolute worldie of a game, but the real embarrassment was that it was final was in Spain. It was the Ramon Sanchez Pizjuan Stadium in Sevilla. So something else linking ourselves and Barcelona is that we've both lost European finals in that stadium in the south of Spain, down in Andalusia. And the fact that, of course, we won the Cup Winners' Cup at the Nou Camp. I don't think Barcelona are too keen to be linked with us, but can't help it. So, really sad. Terry Venables, of course, a writer. Was it Hazel Books? Didn't do books, but certainly part of the screenwriting process, because it became a TV series. Bit of a singer, raconteur, dodgy businessman, finger in so many pies. And I just remember an interview with him probably in the 90s or something like that, when somebody said, yeah, you're so busy, you're like a workaholic, and he said, well, I can rest when I'm dead, and 80 years old, that's a good innings, and he's certainly had a hell of a life, and I hope he enjoys that well-earned rest. Eltel, absolute legend. And you think about it, it's 1992 since an English manager won the top flight in English football. The Premier League, no English manager has ever won the Premier League. Quite an amazing thing. So Terry Venables, one of the last of the great English managers who made his mark on world football. This video, if you want to talk about Rangers singularly failing to make their mark on Scottish football at the weekend by dropping those 2 points at Pittodrie, I would point you, as always, towards Gersnet. Say most people, and thanks very much. I'm surprised I got more than half a dozen people subscribing to this wee channel of mine. Thanks very much to everybody who has. I know the majority of you will know me through Gersnet. Get on that, please. I'll try and post a link in the description to this little video. A link to my immediate post-match reaction pod on Gersnet on Sunday, describing my feelings on what occurred up there and what didn't occur. I will also put a link on for the main flagship show, the Gersnet flagship show, which Craig and David and Grant, they put a great show together discussing their reaction to that game and having a wee look forward to the Aris Limassol match. What I'm doing in this little video, though, however, is I am reacting to the reaction my last video got. If you just go down this page, you'll see Rangers versus Scotland is the kind of clickbait headline. That's the title of that pod. And I think I didn't really. I deliberately, if you see my other titles to other videos, I'm not into the whole clickbait thing. I did another one that was, I think, the second most views in any of these videos of mine was a headline that said Rangers are rubbish and it's my fault. And I was just talking about my superstition and jinxes and all that. But people have just seen Rangers are rubbish. I'll have a bit of that. So it's quite easy to do, I think, kind of incendiary headlines. But I'm going to call this one, you should see by now, Rangers versus England, which might be clickbait as well, but it's hopefully it's self-explanatory, because I think this something needs to be dealt with. A lot of people took the time to watch that last video and then reply to me as well on the comment section under Rangers versus Scotland. Thanks very much to everybody who did that. I really appreciate that, no matter who you support, no matter what club you support, no matter your views on the whole matter of Rangers versus the Tartan Army. As I say, I just was wanting last week to do a video about the European Championship. Scotland's recently ended very successful campaign, getting them to Euro 2024, getting them through to Germany next summer. I wanted to talk about San Marino scoring goals in successive matches for the first time in nearly 20 years in that qualifying campaign. I wanted to talk about the fact a guy called Yanis Hadji scored for Romania, scored a winner against Israel in Hungary to put Romania through. Yanis Hadji on loan in Spain from Rangers, of course. But the guy who scored the first goal for Romania in that game is called Georgi Puskas. And here he was scoring at the Pančo Arena. Pančo, the national stadium in Hungary, is named after Ferenc Puskas, their most famous player. But his nickname when he was in Spain was Pancho, and this is when he was playing for Real Madrid, Puskas. So this stadium's kind of named after him. So he had a guy called Puskas, who I think plays club football in Hungary anyway. But I thought that was really interesting. I also wanted to talk about the fact that the Moldova against Albania game in the national stadium in Chisinau, the cameras that watch the teams coming down the tunnel. Scotland played there a couple of years ago. I saw the same thing, but it pans back over the main stand in Chisinau. It's a massive block of flats. I'm assuming it's the council flats that are hanging over almost this stadium. And there's never any lights on. It's always nighttime games, you see it, and there's never any lights on in any of the flats. What the hell's going on there? Really weird. And also the fact that Albania and Moldova, it was a 6-pointer. Not because we're trying to avoid finishing bottom of the group, because the two of them are trying to get through. They're trying to qualify. It was quite in a group that contained Poland and Czechia. I don't even know what happened there in the end up, because before I posted that video, before I went into talking about the football and the stats and all that, the kind of geekery that I like to get into about the Euros, I felt I had to respect the fact that most of the people who have been kind enough to subscribe to this wee channel of mine will be Rangers fans, and that means that proportionately a few of them will have a problem with Scotland, with the Scotland national team or with the Tartan Army. And also there'll be people watching who just support Scotland but don't support Rangers and are aware or maybe hoping that there's some sort of tension there. So I wanted to explain my position on that. It's an ongoing issue, but I think there's too much made of it, because I think that every support of every club in Scotland has a problem with the Scotland national team, or breaks an element within each support of every club in Scotland. A small element will actively dislike the Scotland national team, because I think most supports in this country break down the same way. percentage-wise, you'll have like maybe 5 to 10% of that support that will actively go and watch Scotland, that loves to go and watch Scotland and home games at Hampden. Maybe another kind of like 2 to 5% within that will go to away games, total Tartan Army, home and away. They'll go all over the world to watch Scotland. And then the vast majority, however, will be kind of ambivalent about the Scotland national team, in the purest possible sense, that just maybe don't even like international football. They're neither up nor down about it. They just concentrate on club football, and God knows, as I was saying in that previous video, it's expensive enough just following club football these days without having to put your hand in your pocket to follow Scotland as well. People that might just watch Scotland games on telly, be happy to cheer them on from the armchair, but don't want to fork out to go to Scotland games, and some people who just don't like international football at all. I think it's the vast majority. And it was Hampden would need a capacity of 300,000 to 500,000. If the vast majority of every support in the country needed to go and watch Scotland games, and I think you'll then get the same kind of 2 to 5% of any support of any club in Scotland who actively despises the SFA and therefore doesn't see why they should watch the national 11, the representative 11 of that football association, because everybody has got a beef with the Football Association in Scotland as well. We're caught up as Rangers fans in the whole Old Firm bubble. No, it's a conspiracy. The SFA favour them. Oh no, the SFA favour us. And what we forget is that the rest of the country just thinks, the SFA are obsessed with Rangers and Celtic, and they're forgetting all about us. They don't want any hassle, so they're going to keep the two of them pleased. The two kind of Glasgow ugly sisters as a absolute balloon of an ex-Aberdeen and Everton director termed us to try and catch a headline, and it's absolutely worked. I've played right into his hands about 20 years later using the same term. Anyway, so even maybe Falkirk fans, for example, Falkirk not being allowed to get promoted to the SPL, to the top flight, because they needed to have Brockville all seated. That's, although it's the SPL, everybody looks at the SFA as being responsible ultimately for everything. It's like, I think it's the same with every football country in the world, every football club in the world. Their national association is the people who appoint referees, and everybody is united in their hatred of refs. Everybody loves to hate refs, and it's the same with the national football associations. So there'll always be somebody who takes that too far. A certain element within each support, I've got a total beef with them. I'm not going to forget about that. I'm not going to watch their bloody international team, the FA's international team. I'm going to just stick to my club. So I don't think there's any difference there in the Rangers support. I think it's the same proportion of Rangers supporters who actively hate the SFA, actively hate the Scotland national team, but I've got a bigger support, so it gets more coverage, and also you have that situation where I think the supports of the bigger clubs, Celtic, Aberdeen, Hibs, Hearts, Dundee United, are united in a desire for Rangers fans to hate the national team, and I need to ostracise Rangers from the Scotland national team. They're letting their club allegiances, etc., bleed into their following of their local national team. So it's something that's become a kind of issue. I don't think it's as big an issue as it should be. I think it's blown out of all proportion. But in the replies I got to that video, one that stuck out for me, and I think it serves as a good vehicle for me to discuss the points that still need to be discussed. Excuse me, it was a lady called Leanne, I think Leanne Campbell, forgive me if I've got your name wrong. It's there. I responded in writing underneath that comment to everybody who I felt needed responded to with more than just a like and a sign of appreciation for just getting in touch. But Leanne made the point that kind of struck me. She started off by saying she thought I was really fair-minded and I was being really balanced, and I thought that's really nice. And then she said, but you are the exception to the rule when it comes to Rangers supporters. And I thought, oh, here we go. And she went on to say that she thought she dared anyone, challenged anyone to disprove that Rangers fans hate their own country more than the fans of any other club in the world hate their own country. And I thought that's taking things too far. For a start, in that previous video I had mentioned the Barcelona, Barcelona, whose very name, the order of their name, CFFC, Barcelona FC, CF Barcelona, has changed according to when Franco came in. He tried to Spanishify it, stuff like that. They've had a terrible time under the Spanish regime. People in Catalonia definitely have, and I think anybody who wears a Spain jersey at a Barcelona home game is in the away section, or they are the subject of a murder inquiry or a documentary about a freak show, about a village idiot, about a total weirdo. Nobody who supports Barcelona is wearing a Spain shirt. They absolutely despise Madrid because it's the seat of a centralist government, a Castilian government. They see it as So everybody knows, even Espanyol, who are inevitable in a city like that, there's going to be some. We don't have as big a problem with Spain. We need a club for people in a city who don't have as big a problem with Spain. Espanyol are set up, but they end up, they change their name to the Catalan spelling of Espanyol. Very similar, obviously, away from the Spanish spelling, because they're still acknowledging their roots, acknowledging where they come from. I think a good chance that Barcelona fans hate their own country much more than Rangers fans have ever hated Scotland. And there are Rangers fans who actively make out that they hate Scotland. I feel as if they're taking it too far. I feel as if they're taking it too seriously, and that's the main point I want to make in this video. It's something that shouldn't be taken too seriously. Politics should be, but you should separate politics from nationalism. Nationalism is a kind of politics, a kind of sub-politics that's used to bring in and break down unions. I love unions, trade unions, the Union of Kingdoms in Great Britain. I love the European Union, the idea of it anyway, how it's supposed to work. I voted Remain. I think we should all get together with like-minded people throughout the world and try and protect each other, try and make life more comfortable physically, make trade easier, just totally stop the risks of conflict breaking out. And the first thing that's used to attack those kind of basic human principles is nationalism. So I'm always really wary of people taking this stuff too far. Sport should be this kind of safest arena for notions of nationalism, and really it's just notions of locality. It's a kind of lazy, these folk are all kind of from my area, I'm going to go and support them. It means a lot to you if somebody in your family does well at school or something like that. It's an extension of that feeling. I feel obviously it becomes completely different. Sometimes nationalism is a great vehicle, as I said in the previous video, for democracy, for bringing down totalitarian regimes, but that's really all about bringing down totalitarian regimes rather than the nationalism. And Leanne went on to say that she felt as if my retort, she was predicting a retort from me, which would be that Celtic fans were the Republic of Ireland top, because I think she forgot to mention something that I'm going to come on to about Rangers fans wearing the England. She said that Rangers fans were so hateful of Scotland that they supported England. Our traditional rivals, our historical rivals, or historic rivals. Historical would mean they're all reading Herodotus, but it was put in the language of treachery, of collaboration. I feel that was just too much, I have empathy for the England national team. I hate the England rugby team. It's a class thing, and I've total empathy for the England national team because, let's say, people from Manchester, Newcastle, Liverpool, people who are watching the football, a lot of them have much more in common with me than I'd have with a lot of very posh people who happen to be born in Scotland. That's the way I kind of look at the world. So you're just rounding things up. It's an approximation when you go and support your national team, and it should stay that way. And I feel that with England and Scotland both having played the first international football match ever played in the history of all time, that we've got so much in common. England have massively underachieved considering they invented the game. We've massively underachieved considering we invented passing, and up until very recently we were neck and neck in terms of meetings with England. They found it very hard to beat us over the years. When they did beat us, England, they tend to hammer us, but in terms of games won, it was kind of neck and neck with Scotland and England. There's still not much difference, even in the modern era when there's streets ahead of us. So I always feel as if there's almost a trickle-down effect sometimes. And I'm sorry that it's trickle-down or trickle-up, but it's just England do something, we do a kind of slightly lesser version of it. So England doing really well means that Scotland have the possibility to do well, I've always found. So I have a lot of empathy with the England national team. I didn't always feel that way. I would say in Leanne's point that Rangers fans hate their own country. A lot of those Rangers fans that are into all that kind of stuff hating Scotland, they probably are pro-Britain. They probably are pro-UK, which is also their country. I'm from Ayrshire first, then I'm from Glasgow, I'm a Glaswegian now, then I see myself as Scottish, and then I see myself as British, and then I see myself as European, then I see myself as just somebody who loves the whole planet, and all the good things in the whole planet, and I want to make the whole planet better. But I feel as if there is this whole kind of idea that if you support England, that's the worst thing you can possibly do. That's taking it too far. I don't really see that being a big problem. Leanne was also mentioned that she thought nobody would have a problem with Ireland. Nobody would have a problem with Celtic fans wearing an Ireland jersey, or should have a problem with it, because, well, they are descended from the Irish. We're all Celts in Scotland, and we certainly are. I fully agree with that. I'm quite proud of that. I've certainly got a problem with it anyway, and that nobody's ever had a problem with the Irish the way they've had a problem with the English. The Irish don't fall out with anybody, apparently. It's what Leanne was telling us, except each other, obviously. So I fully agree with that. I hate saying this. It's like I'm prostituting my family to prove that I'm not a bigot, but that's life supporting Rangers. Both my grandfathers, maternal and paternal, were Catholic, both from the Ayrshire coast, both from the Clyde coast, both from the southwest Scotland on the water. It's a good swim to Ireland. Basically, if you can get around Arran, you can swim to Ireland from where I am. So it's almost inevitable that back in time I am descended from people who came over maybe during the potato famine, and that's sick way. I find that really exotic. Thousands of people died so you could be a bit more fancy in your in your history, like your genetic history. But yeah, there you go. I've always thought I've never had a problem with that, because things change. Things always change. Even your Fitzpatricks and Fitzwilliams and whatever you from Ireland. The Fitz prefix comes from when the Normans, after having invaded England in 1066, we all got that in school, nipped over to Ireland and started doing damage over there as well. And the Normans themselves descended from Vikings rather than just being straightforwardly French. So everybody's changing all the time. Ethnicities are never stable, never solid. I loved laughing at the whole kind of, I want to retain my Anglo-Saxon purity, from racists. Well, that's the Angles and the Saxons getting together to be beautifully impure, to totally enjoying themselves and having a good shag and all that. So I really love the idea. I love the idea that everybody's just totally intermingled. There's no solid fixed kind of identity, and to start trying to pretend that there is and drawing arbitrary lines like that is really dangerous. It's basically racist, and I think it's a terrible way to vote for a political party or whatever like that. So yeah, I think when you look at teams like Dynamo Tbilisi from Georgia, Shakhtar Donetsk or Dnipropetrovsk, whatever, from the Ukraine, they must have hated being part of the Soviet Union. They must have hated the country that they were ostensibly a part of, and that's before you get into Kosovan teams when they were part of Serbia, and Serbia itself was Yugoslavia. So that's the idea that Rangers fans hate their own country more than anybody else is complete nonsense for me, I'm afraid. But I've done a more kind of sober response to that in the comment section. Please feel free to check that out. I would also say, I think what Leanne's referring to, and she's absolutely right, but even though she never mentioned it, is something that happened around about, I'd say circa 2000. I don't remember the exact time, but I remember going to a couple of pre-season friendlies at Ibrox. It was t-shirt weather, and the t-shirt that was being worn more than any other, the t-shirt of choice, was the England shirt, the Three Lions. The stands at Ibrox, more than even Rangers gear was being worn. Everybody's wearing England shirts. Now, what the hell is going on here? That is taking it too far. It was simultaneously humiliating and hilarious. I just thought this is absolutely brilliant, because it was obviously a reaction to the Tartan Army thing of starting to hate Rangers. And that, I can't say I'm innocent in that front. I thought this was going too far. This reminded me of, I was reminded of it again a couple of summers ago, the delayed Euro 2020. Scotland play England at Wembley again in the final of the Euros, second time in our history, and I'm watching it from home, but I saw some STV footage, I think it was the next day, of Glasgow Green, the big screens up, and had little kind of benches out, little kind of picnic arrangement, various benches, tables with little benches on them, and people were watching the game outside. I think it rained anyway, so luckily it was literally dampened down, but there was lots of Glasgow people at some of those benches that were booing Flower of Scotland and singing, along with God Save the Queen, and then actively cheering on England against Scotland. That's too much. That's too far. There's no law against it. It's not illegal. It just in the kind of code of football fandom. That's taking it too far. I don't have any problem. I'm not really actively cheering against England these days, except when they're playing Scotland. But I'm never going to cheer anybody against Scotland. That was pretty bad. So I can't declare innocence on that, because back at 86, 87, the Soonest Revolution, and my good friend and sometime colleague Ronnie Esplin wrote an article some years ago for 442, I think it was, trying to trace the root of this kind of enmity that was growing up between the Scotland support, some elements of the Scotland support, and Rangers. And he traced it, I think, quite correctly to this season, 86, 87. The post-Heysel ban on English clubs in Europe meant that the only place they were going to get European football and the same kind of wages was Ibrox, because Lawrence Marlborough had just taken over. It was soon going to be David Murray coming in there, and they were getting, this was somewhere they could come and they could play in Europe, and they could get good money. And at that time, still at 85, 86, 87, it's still quite rare for non-Scots, any non-Scot, to be in a top-flight Scottish football team. You'd had Irish and the odd English player here and there, Scandinavians and that various point, but these were all matters of interest because this kind of stood out. So everybody was usually Scottish. So Rangers bringing in Chris Woods, the England goalkeeper, Terry Butcher, the England captain. By January, we'd brought in Graham Roberts as well. And we would go to away grounds, and we'd go to Tynecastle, go to Easter Road, go to Pittodrie, and they'd be singing Flower of Scotland. They'd all be singing Flower of Scotland. They're taunting you with your own nationality as a Rangers fan. And it got to the point where the end of that season, I'm still staying with my mum and dad. I was like 17 at the end of 86, 87 season, and the boy that lived across the road from me, Mark, lovely fella, he's coming out his house, he's coming out his front door, his mum and dad's house, blue nose, same year as school, at Schoolasm, really nice guy, and he's got the Lion rampant, and he's got the Scotland jersey on. He's off to Hampden to see Scotland against England, and I'm not going. And I'd been to a couple of Scotland England games at Hampden already. I was down at Wembley with my dad when I was like 14 in 1983. So it was just a few years before, just 4 years before, but I wasn't going that day. And I remember half joking, but kind of half serious, just shouting across to Mark, kind of gently, as he left the house, England. And he's like, oh, you like get to, just a joke and all that. And I think it was also part of that whole confused thing when you're in your teens, where you're trying to establish, you think that being bitter and being nasty and having a cynical line is the same as being tough or being clever or whatever it is you're trying to achieve. But also, I think that it had been getting to me. I was at most games, most league games that season, most Rangers games that season. I was doing home and away in those days as well. I had been before. It wasn't just a bandwagon jumper. This is something I wear like stripes. The fact that I was going to watches all through the kind of early to mid 80s when we were absolutely garbage. It's just because I was young. I wear it like a badge of honour, but I think basically, if I'd been older, if I'd been in my 30s or whatever, I probably would have had enough with how bad we were then. I didn't know any different, really. Just the thrill of going to the games was enough for me, I think, quite sustaining, although it was really painful. But here it was getting to me, this, Flower of Scotland stuff, getting slagged for having English players in your team. And this is how fans react. And this is the thing that I'm kind of, advising against in these videos, is that you don't react to the taunts. You just decide what you are on your own. You don't like this wall that's building up. Please, Rangers fans, don't support Scotland. I'm not going to go along with that. That's nonsense. But I had a wee taste of it then, and I think what then happened, I've got to be honest, first of all, Leanne is and other people, non-Rangers fans, objecting to the fact that Rangers fans are wearing the England top. But strictly speaking, it's a World Cup winning nation. Only 8 nations have won the World Cup. 5 European, 3 South American. Now you see plenty of Spain tops going about, don't you? You see lots of France tops down at the fives and all that. You see Spain tops all over every city in Scotland. Same with the France top. Here I am, a few props here. I'm a man in his 50s, but even I've got that's my Italy top. That's I think that's the top from France 98 or Euro 2000. I'm not really sure, but I wore that to the fives about 5 stone ago, as Derek Johnson would say. And that's a nation we fought against during the Second World War, or half of it. You know what the Italians are like. And there's my Argentina top. Argentina, the Falklands, they invaded British territory. They killed British soldiers. But I think the Argentinian junta, at that point in time, the military dictatorship, killed far more Argentinians, tortured Argentinians off them for years. Absolutely horrendous. And it's coming back. They're getting another right-wing bampot in over there. And the first thing they're talking about is Malvinas. Like I say, nationalism is the best way to stop people getting on with their lives. So I think you see the amount of Lionel Messi tops that are going about in Scotland are all over Britain, really. Nobody is. The Argentina top means football. It means that kind of football. It means a glamour. It means a winning type of football. And of course, there was the Germans, Second World War and all that. And here I have my 1970 replica 1970 Germany jersey. It's got the Gerd Müller 13 in the back. He scored 10 goals in that finals. Germany finished third. The last guy, he scored double figures in the World Cup finals. But they won the World Cup in 74. Müller similar score in the win on the final. And there's my replica 74 Germany jersey. Was it 66? I think it's probably 66. There's my 1954 replica. That's Toff's, a kind of recreation. That's not a genuine jersey. Helmet Ran, all that kind of stuff. Max Morlock. And here's my the classic, the one you've all been waiting for, Italia 90. Andy Brema scoring the winner for Germany in that final in the Stadio Olimpico in Rome, scoring late on to win that final against Diego Maradona's Argentina, the defending champions, who they'd lost in the previous final. Anyway, the whole point is I've got all these jerseys of other World Cup winning nations, and that's just something that happens. People love it. There's Brazil tops everywhere, especially during the summer when I'm at Glasgow and that, all over Scotland. The exponents of the beautiful game, so to speak. And what's the only other nation we haven't mentioned that's won the World Cup? Yeah, Uruguay. Why does nobody wear Uruguay jerseys? Could it be because they've inflicted Scotland's biggest ever defeat on them, beating us 7-0 in the 1954 World Cup finals, a record defeat? Or, of course, more likely 1986. I remember watching it. We only needed to beat Uruguay to get through to a bad Uruguay team to get through to the second round of the World Cup for the first time in our history, and they went down to 10 men. Uruguay, man sent off after 1 minute of the game, and they then gouged, spat, fouled, dived, time wasted their way to the 0-0 draw that got them through and put Scotland out, and everybody's got a problem with their FA. Well, that night the whole world was united behind, the whole world outside Uruguay was united behind Ernie Walker, the head of the SFA, when live in Netza, that's the short version of that city in Mexico that we played the game in, described Uruguay as the scum of world football, and nobody disagreed. But you also forget, a lot of people will forget, that in 1990 Uruguay found a third horrible way to put Scotland out of the World Cup, and that was we'd lost to Costa Rica, beat Sweden in Genoa, and then lost narrowly to Brazil in Turin. But we still had a chance of going through, as it was one of those World Cups where the best third-placed finishers would go through, and that would be us as long as Uruguay didn't beat South Korea in their final game in their group. And I think, was it in Verona? I don't know, don't quote me, but I remember that watching that game, and everybody, I was working at the time, I was diving in and out this room at the television, and we're just like, what's going on, what's happening, it's still 0-0, we're going to go through. Although being Scots, we're all like, just a matter of time these Bampots score. I think it was the last kick of the ball. It was certainly like kind of 3 minutes from the end. It was the late 80s, if not 91 or 92 minutes, that Daniel Fonseca scores the only goal of the game. I think it was a header, and Uruguay had found a third way to put us out of a World Cup in horrible circumstances, this time without even playing us. They are a hell of a football nation. Beautiful thing about Uruguay strip, even though nobody in Scotland wears it, I don't know if anybody else throughout the world wears it, they've got 4 stars on the top above their club crest, their national team crest, sorry. And yet they've only won 2 World Cups. Only. Must be great. 1930, the first World Cup that they hosted. 1950, look that up. I could do a video about that on its own, but just read the Wikipedia facts about how they won that World Cup in 1950, and that will thrill you in itself. But they've got 4 stars, and the other 2 are for the 1924 and 1928 Olympics, which before we had a FIFA World Cup, it was the best thing we had to finding out the football tournament at the Olympics would decide who the best team in the world was, although the home nations, as we call ourselves, wouldn't take part in it, because we just thought that whoever won the home international championship in the British Isles, they were the best team in the world, de facto best team in the world, because just we didn't need to bother ourselves with these foreigners. We soon found out different, of course, but at that point in time, so Uruguay decided that they've been 4 times champions of the world, and that's what they've got their 4 stars for. Quite interesting. Great football nation. But yeah, that's it. So people wear, World Cup winning jerseys. The jerseys of World Cup winning nations. I'm stretching it a bit to say that's the reason that Scotland fans did that, because I know for a fact it isn't. But it just goes to prove that it's, we shouldn't be too down on it. I was at the game, Euro 90, for example. I was at Euro 96, right? I didn't see Scotland at Euro 96. My mate and I bought tickets in 1994 before we knew who was playing at what stadium, before anybody had qualified other than the hosts. And we ended up with tickets for the semi-final at Wembley and the final. And things had happened at the other games we're attending. England didn't go to a single England game before we saw them in the semi-final, but the locals in the kind of neutral so-called section were getting more and more aggressive towards it. Some of it was my fault. I'll go into that if I ever tell you about my trip to Euro 96, but they were getting more and more aggressive towards the supporters of the Portugal-Turkey, for example. So England fans locals are trying to have a go at the Turks and the Portuguese about the England national team and stuff like that. And as England did better, they were getting more excitable, to the point I was at the quarter final the day England beat Spain on penalties to get to the semi final. My mate and I were sat outside. I was sat in a car park outside Anfield because we were going to go to that night's quarter final, which was France against the Dutch, and the local, even the Scousers, it's supposed to be anybody but England for a lot of Scousers, but they were out there, they were jumping about, trying to get in the face of the Dutch, trying to get in the face of the French. We're going to do you. This is, we're back, and I think it was quite aggro. And we thought we had to think long and hard. Do we want to go to this game? Do we want to risk going to see England in the semi-finals? It was still that age. It was 26, 27, a bit grown up to do, but there was still that kind of thing, that feeling back then that England was just the enemy. They were the enemy, the way a lot of people want it still to be. And yeah, we're really wary about it. But we decided it would be like if we were at, for example, the Copa America, and we had tickets. It was in Argentina, and we had tickets to watch Argentina in Buenos Aires in the semi-final. Would you go? You're damn right you would go. What an experience that would be. So we thought, look at it as we're going to see the host nation in the semis of a major tournament, and keep our mouth shut. And the thing that really annoyed me then, they've got the whole national anthem thing, singing God Save the Queen. That God Save the Queen is not the English national anthem. It should have Land of Hope and Glory. They should have Jerusalem. As I say, it's a British national anthem, and it's a derby within Britain, so it's really bad to have that as your national anthem, as I'm going to keep saying. But that's not for viewers in Northern Ireland. In Northern Ireland, you can make up your own mind. I'll leave that to you guys. I'm not going to interfere there. The other thing is the waving of the Union Jack. At that point in time, England fans very recently have been waving Union Jacks at lots of games, and that peed me off as well. The blue in that flag is the saltire, and this is about England versus Scotland, for example. So no, not up for that at all. But that night, it was just St George's crosses everywhere. The old Wembley, by that point in time, it was a dump, but a beautiful dump. Still more beautiful than the new Wembley. Is really safe, really modern, really comfortable, but just a total non-entity in terms of a building, in terms of atmosphere within itself. Wembley was just magical. The old Wembley, the original Wembley, sorry, was just absolutely magical. The Twin Towers and all that. The roof, there's something about the roof was just, it was low slung and all that. It was just absolutely gorgeous, really romantic. And it's the summer of Skinner and Badil, the Three Lions song. And you see all those Germany jerseys I've got there. I always slag fans. I know guys who support like the Dunfermline, Hearts, St Johnstone, etc. And I used to know these guys. 2012 changed a lot of things, and they always would slag you for, it must be easy supporting Rangers because they win all the time. They win most games. Try some real football. But I don't have a favourite English club, whereas they would, and it wasn't Exeter City or Scunthorpe. It would be Chelsea or Liverpool or Man United or something like that. A team that tends to win all the time. So it's like, I think you like your little taste of teams winning all the time. Mr. Hypocrite though, because when it comes to the Scotland national team, I refuse to stop supporting Scotland. I will support Scotland as a point of principle. But I bloody adore the Germans. Don't I love the Germans, who were winning everything when I was growing up. They're now, the only reason they've got to this Euros is because they're hosting it. I think Scotland could give them a good doing just now. Germany are awful. Have been for a few years now, but back then, I just totally adored them because it was like what Scotland couldn't do. They just took care of business all the time, the Germans, and I've got a really healthy respect for them. But here I was at Wembley watching Germany try to get into major finals again, and I wasn't interested. I wanted England to win. From the moment that game started that night, the atmosphere, and it's just people watching their own country. It's just finally sunk into my napper that night. I think because of no Union Jack, whatever, it's just people supporting the country they were born in. It's a kind of laziness, that kind of, nationalism through sport. You're just going along to watch your local team. It's an international team. It finally sunk in there, and there's another incident that happened at half time. England score straight away. The place goes nuts. And Scott and I, still that thing where we think the Scots have got the monopoly on passion within the British Isles, but not when it's an England that have never reached, at this point in time, they've never reached another major final after winning the World Cup against the same opponents in that same stadium, the very same stadium. 30 years beforehand, they were going absolutely spare, and it was like, you instantly, I hope these folk do it. They really need this. These people need this. And they're just ordinary dudes like you and me. Ordinary lads and lassies and boys and girls. What an atmosphere. David O'Leary sat just behind me. His family is quite mental. But at half time, so we're keeping quiet, we're keeping our mouth shut. At half time, guy turns round to us. It's one each. Stefan Kuntz, I think that's what we're calling him. He equalised for Germany. This big Yorkshire fella stands up and just turns around and goes, "You two are quiet. Are you German?" And the whole place, literally, we just froze. Me and Scott just froze. The whole place turns round, and suddenly all these people who were just supporting their own country had become the knuckle dragging, kind of hooligans we'd seen rampaging across Europe for years. And I just had to front up, and I was like, "No, mate, it's worse than that." And it's, I heard the accent, and it's, "Oh, you're jocks." And they just started talking away to the guy about football, and we're telling him where we'd been in different grounds, just discussing the grounds, because he'd been there as a Leeds fan, to Old Trafford, etc. We'd been at Elland Road as well. But everybody else that was going to beat seven shades out of us, send us home in an ambulance if we'd been German, just turned around and get back on with their business. They're almost disappointed. It's just jocks, because they liked us. They didn't have a problem with Scotland, not just because they'd beaten us earlier on in that tournament. But it's like you used to meet people on holiday, English folk on holiday, and they'd be like, "Oh, I felt really sorry for you when you get put out the 78 World Cup. You're our second team, we always cheer you on." And you'd be like, patronising bandpots. But that's just your wee man syndrome thing from Scotland. They're being nice. And they just saw the Germans. That's that kind of taking on a British problem or a British bit of history. People from all over Britain died in their thousands, hundreds of thousands during the Second World War. So for the English, they'd say it's down to them to be the rivals with Germany. Using that they can use that as a reason. I think it's toxic. Obviously, the Second World War, the Nazis and all that just totally did far worse damage to the Germans. Well, maybe the exception of the Jews, and half of them are Germans as well. So that's a whole thing about nationality. It's just really confusing than they did to Britain. So I feel it's really bad to take on the war tropes that were taken on famously by the tabloids at that time when England were playing Germany in the 96 semi-final. But they wanted the Germans as a derby rival, and then the Germans kept beating them. The Germans just kept beating them. So they were looking around thinking, we need another rival, a derby rival, that we've got a chance of beating. Well, there's these people that we've played more than anybody else who seem to absolutely despise us. By the time it got to that Euro 90, and it's 3 years later just, that Euro 2000 playoff match in late 1999, Scotland against England, to get into the Euros finals, they beat us 2-0 at Hampden in the first leg. But famously, Alan Green, 5 Live Radio, I remember him just calling it out at the time that God Save the Queen was utterly trashed by a Tartan Army who, as I said in the previous video, hadn't bothered turning up to support Scotland in any numbers in the qualifying campaign, when I went to all the games, but were there in major numbers to hate England in the actual playoff match. So I think at that point that gave that element within the English support who needed a derby rival that could be time to come back to Scotland. That gave them the reason to come back to Scotland as their main rival. And I remember that kind of vox pops outside Wembley before the second leg, and they're interviewing England fans going into Wembley for that game, like, "I'm going to boo through Flower of Scotland after what they did to God Save the Queen. I'm going to boo through that. I'm going to trash that tonight." You're thinking, this is new for them. This is a new thing. They've kind of realised, they've almost just taken it on board that there's Scotland fans who actually hate England, and they can't handle it. And even after the game, I think it was the same people they're interviewing. I remember this, they're interviewed, and they're all going, yeah, well, we beat. Actually, Scotland played quite well. Actually, Scotland were really unlucky tonight. I thought we were terrible. They couldn't help being nice about us at that point in time. They couldn't help being nice. And I know you get England fans who come, and they came to the friendly at Parkhead, was that 2014 or 2015, just after the India referendum, they're singing Scotland said no, as if saying no was a failure, is losing or something. I don't know. It meant we want to be part of England, we just want to be united in the same kind of economic union, whatever. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. You can get into it far too much. And I feel as if that was what happened, and that I think certain elements of the Rangers support. We'd had this thing when we had English players, and then you've seen the Tartan Army treating God Save the Queen like that, and Rangers fans began actively supporting England almost to annoy the Tartan Army, that anti-Rangers, a kind of poisonously anti-England element, which was, apart from anything else, just bringing down the Scotland national team, is skewing our focus and meaning we didn't have to beat all these other teams that you actually needed to beat to get into a major finals. It was all about beating England. So I love it when Scotland beat England. I've only seen it happening live once. Richard Gough scored the only goal of the game back in '85. But I don't. Who do I want to beat most? Probably Germany or Brazil, something like that. It's just, it doesn't. For me, it's a good traditional rivalry, and I really enjoy it. And I really want to win when we play England, but there's so much toxicity in it now, so much politics, which I just find it really cancerous. And I know people are saying, "Oh, well, hope when you go to Ibrox and you sing all these, the national, you sing God Save the King and all these other kind of anti-Irish songs and what have you." Well, I'm against all that. I'm against any kind of sectarianism and what have you. And for me, a lot of it, like watching any football club, when you go along to the cinema, you want to believe that the aliens are going to invade Earth. You want to believe that, that there's ghosts and there's monsters and stuff. But when you come out the cinema, you still want a buzz from it. You want that little break from reality to keep reality a bit nicer, a bit more exciting. But if you actually physically believe it, then you need to be going to a mental institution. And it's the same with me when it comes to all the different rivalries, club and country. It's got really bad because of what happened to Rangers in 2012. It's made me very bitter in a way that I'd always strived against. And I still haven't come back to normal, as I would call it. But I think a lot of that's to do with the social media landscape. Look, guys, this video's gone too long, but I might as well go for it. I might as well finish off. I might as well try and get my first ever 50-minute video and make sure that all the ones I do from now on are like 15 minutes long, or you'll never want to watch one again. I think it is a subject that needs a lot of discussing anyway, but I'm showing you my props here. So why don't I show you this one as well, my love of German football. That's a Stuttgart, VfB Stuttgart jersey. Beautiful jersey, classic strip. Always makes Stuttgart players look kind of rangy, long and skinny. But we played Stuttgart, Rangers played Stuttgart, you'll remember, 3 different Champions League qualifying campaigns in the space of about 10 years. And the first 2, it was the first game of that group, was Rangers beating VfB 2-1 at Ibrox. And VfB Stuttgart would take the lead in both those games, and we then reply with 2 goals. Now, the goals that they scored in both those games, the first one, it was Kevin Karanye. The second one, it was Mario Gomez. I think it was 2003. The next one was 2006, 7? I'm not really sure. I need to look that up. But within a few years of each other, the third time we played them, they beat us 2-0, going on 4-0, and what we thought at the time was our worst ever Champions League campaign. But Kevin Karanye, well, Mario Gomez, Italian sounding first name, his father's Spanish, mother German. He could play for Spain or Germany. I know, and I made the wrong choice as far as I'm concerned at that point in time. Wrong choice for himself. Kevin Karanye, German international, born in Rio de Janeiro. He's born in Brazil. Well, it's not the capital, sorry, Brazil is the capital of Brazil, but he's born in Rio de Janeiro. His mother was Panamanian, his dad was German, but his dad's dad, his paternal grandfather, was Hungarian. He could have played for any one of 4 different countries, Panama, Hungary, Germany, or Brazil, and he went for Germany as well. And those 2, they just show the kind of arbitrary nature of nationhood when it comes to football. And a man that joins, I've showed you all those Germany jerseys, but the man who was manager of Germany, when they got to the 66 World Cup final, when they won the 1974 World Cup, when they won Euro 72, got to the 76 final of the Euros, Helmut Schön, a famous name for guys of my age, Helmut Schön, famous name from my childhood. He was a great manager of Germany. He was born, Helmut Schön, in Dresden in 1915, in the second year of the First World War, and he's born what was then the German Empire, the Second Reich. By the time he's playing football, he gets capped for Germany. Gets about 18 caps between 1937 and 1941. Now, the Nazis took over. Hitler took over in 1933 in Germany. He's playing for the Third Reich. Now, I don't know his politics. Nobody ever admitted to being a Nazi after the end of the Second World War, but he's playing for the Third Reich, and it's the only national team he can play for at that point in time. This is the Germany that's absorbed Austria, parts of Czechoslovakia, and it was absorbing more and more parts of Europe by the time he finished playing for them in 1941. The Soviet Union, obviously, at the end of the Second World War, the Soviet Union takes over the eastern part of Germany, as we all know, in which Dresden is located. And before the Berlin Wall and all that goes up, Helmut Schön realises things are getting a bit dodgy, a bit oppressive here under the Soviets. I'm going to defect over to West Germany, as it was unofficially known to us Brits, us Scots, whatever, us Ayrshire. He goes over, us Celts, he goes over to Hamburg, of all places, defects to Hamburg, and he plays for, of all teams, St. Pauli. He plays for St. Pauli. Considering this is a guy who's played for the Third Reich, but also plays for St. Pauli. And then he becomes a manager, and he takes on the management of, in his youth, his first stint in management is the Saarland, which we all know, but Germany gets split up into East and West Germany after the Second World War, but also a big chunk of it on the west, on the border with France, a lot of French-speaking people, and at the Saarland, it's now a region of Germany, again, it kind of rejoined Germany, late 50s, I think. This is 1953. Helmut Schön takes on the Saarland because it's mostly German-speaking, and in their World Cup qualifying group, 1954, they get West Germany. So he's playing. They lose both games quite narrowly, though, and that ends up getting him the job managing West Germany. And he wins the World Cup eventually, West Germany in 1974, but during that World Cup, in Hamburg, in the Volkspark Stadion, in HSV's ground, but still in Hamburg, the city he defected to, they lose to East Germany. The only time, it was a group match, so it didn't affect them getting on to the final, and it's the only time East Germany ever deigned to play West Germany because they will never want a rematch. It proved that, the DDR was superior and communism was the best kind of thing and all that. It was far better than Western democracy. So they never had a rematch. The only time East met West in international football in Germany, the DDR won 1-0, Jürgen Sparwasser, and Helmut Schön was the manager. So here you have a man who has managed, is a German who has managed one part of Germany against West Germany, and has managed West Germany against East Germany, and East Germany is his homeland, even though he can't live there anymore. And it's absolutely insane. If that doesn't explain to you the arbitrary nature, as I say, of nationalism, of nationhood, apart from anything else, and how the countries can change around you, never mind you changing allegiance to a particular country, then nothing can explain it to you. I hope I've explained far too much here. This video's gone far too long, but I'm going to get it out there because it's something that needs to be spoken about. Hopefully, the next time I talk to you, I might just go ahead and do the kind of 15 minutes of stats I was originally going to do last week that led to me getting into this whole thing about club versus country allegiances. Support whatever club you want, support whatever country you want. Just don't give anybody else a hard time for doing likewise, although I think I've actually done it in this video. Yeah, hypocrisy. It's all hypocrisy. We shouldn't take it too seriously. Thanks very much for your time, folks. Talk to you soon about normal football stuff.